with a family. The website will have your information on it, your profile, contact information. A family will be able to access the new website, the Family Resource website, and contact you. We are going to develop some kind of format that we might be able to help with of how to communicate that what your child needs part. And I think it's really important to have a section where you describe all the strengths and the good parts of everything and who that human being is, and not just concentrate on what's wrong or the difficulties. Like, this is the difficulty, this is how we deal with that. Right. And what do I want from Respite? I think if you have fun with the child, that would be my guess. Now you must, but
safe and fun.
I want, if it were me being the parent, I want that respite provider to get a good relationship with that child and to be able to have joyful experience, to do some play, but also keep those limits going, to have empathy and compassion and acceptance, and keep that structure. And we're going to go into great length in what is often needed to create the container to have play, right? To have some joy and to have some positive adult experience, right? You're not going to be the mom. You're not going to be the teacher. Right. You're going to be somebody that the child trusts and that the parent feels comfortable and safe having their child spend time with you, so they don't have to feel any guilt or worry while they're out having dinner with their husband. Right?
Which we heard the need for, 3 times, right?
Yep. What?
Which we heard the need for 3 times.
Right.
All 3 parents. When was the last time I had, an adult relationship with anyone?
Or in yours, how to take your son out and do something fun with your son. You might choose to use respite to do a variety of things, just to take a nap. Or, I know with a lot of families, that precious time with their typical child that doesn't get met. And so that counteracts that sibling angst that happens. We're gonna start with, what were we gonna start with?
I think you were going to go into the assessing experience. It is therapeutic respite. We were going to skip it's not babysitting because I think our audience knows that. We've covered that and then some. But
we're talking to the tape.
Yeah, Tina's vision, right? When she talked to me a little bit about this, Tina and Linda, and this has been mulling for years in my head, it is thinking about also doing respite for Asher, right? She said, I want you to think about your kiddos with the most needs, Shauna, and he by no means is that kiddo. But I'm also thinking about who would I trust him with, or them together with going to the park? And how do we properly train that respite person to be safe there as well as safe with our other great kids that we know about here? And so I don't want that group gets excluded a lot from some of these things that we do because the kids are just too involved to do that with. And that's what I didn't want to have happen, because that then becomes very difficult too. So we were like, think about all-inclusive, what someone would need to know to do that safely. That's a pretty big charge on us.
And because this is a pilot project, it is to establish that this kind of service would get used. There isn't a big grant to do a sliding scale at this point in time. So we're trying to just find families who can afford it, which is hard. I feel really bad about that, and as soon as Eagle Mount is ready to write a grant to subsidize this, our little grant, our minimal amount of money is under $5,000, some of which will go to buying some lunch today. It's really not sufficient so think of this is the first phase of development. Eagle Mount has graciously accepted. We're part of their mission statement. Now we got the website up and running. We're going to get respite providers on there. We're going to track how much that gets used and then justify writing a grant, and there's a grant writer here. So I think once Eagle Mount sees the need, then we can move into phase 2 of this.
Which that's how everything works, right? You have to show it first before you just come in unless you get a nice donation or whatever, right? We're trying to do this with the Life Scholars program at the college right now too, and I can talk about that at some point. We'll focus on this, but that's another thing that might pair up nicely with what we're doing here.
And it pairs up really nicely with what Eagle Mountain's trying to do, have more family time or adult
Yep,
time,
exactly.
serving
They're
more the
supporting
moms,
the
but
whole
then
family.
a lot of us moms, I'm like, okay, well, yes, I would love to go and go, you know.
But who's
camping
gonna
or
take
yoga
care of my
retreat
child
or
while I
just-
go
Exactly.
through
Yes.
this journaling workshop or
Yeah.
workshop for moms, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to, or they're trying to do. I just came in to talk about behavior, so I'm happy to
But you
support it
care
all.
about your family.
I care about all my family. That's why I'm like, yes, I'll do it. Yes, I'll come in on a Saturday. I love this because, and we don't have a lot of people yet because, I mean, it's unknown. But that's why I thought the recording
Yeah.
was so critical today, because anyone new that we might add can watch this as part of the training.
And
So
I
that's
know
why
there was at least one person that said, I can't make it today, please tell me there's gonna be more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so we will send out another ad saying that training has happened, it's been taped, and you can start being a provider. But thank you guys for coming,
Yes.
for being our
Being
little
our
guinea
pilot.
pigs.
Pilot audience, right?
Okay. Right. So we are gonna start with just an overview of developmental concepts. I wanna say that Sean is here to talk about the behavior. And we both know that's the tip of the iceberg, that there's stuff underneath there. There's underlying needs, motivations, all this other stuff that you can't just look at a behavior and say, oh, I'm gonna change that tip of the iceberg if you don't understand, like Sarah was talking about. He's not doing that to get attention, he's not doing that. He just implodes and melts down. It's like a computer glitch, right? It just, nope, can't do it, I'm gone. And I hope you guys didn't get scared by that child. There are kids where you would need a lot more training than what we're gonna
Sure.
offer today.
And that happens. They come in and shadow at the office when we're working with the kids, so they know what to do. We go to the park. I move my office to the park so they can see what I would do in that setting.
Yeah.
I'm super happy to do any of that as far as a supporting person role.
Yeah, and I also can be a consultant to parents, it's just that I don't have office anymore.
Right. She's floating. She really will go to the park. No. Because that's their office.
I
Sorry.
work in the park. Okay, so I'm gonna start talking about attachment, and
Good.
I'm just gonna go through all these things that I've thought of to communicate. If you wanna ask a question, just raise your hand and I'll try to notice that. Early attachment is like this foundation for the development of a sense of self. Feeling like the world is a safe place, that we have worth, that we are connected versus feeling alone or disconnected. So it's a very interpersonal developmental concept. Attachment doesn't happen through learning how to do puzzles.
Right.
You know, it's a interpersonal developmental thing. In terms of attachment styles, now I know for a fact that kids with attachment issues arrive here at Eagle Mount or in many settings that they also can have special needs and attachment difficulties. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of how to think about attachment. So let's say there's this group of people that have a secure attachment, okay? It's only about 60% of the population. So just say, oh, it's not uncommon even in typical developing people to not have secure attachment. And the basics of that is, here's the secure base of the primary attachment figure. The child can go out and explore, and the parent celebrates that. And then if the child has an attachment need, the attachment figure welcomes the child back, regulates the child, ready to go out again. It's this rubber band type of thing, okay? If we move down to insecure attachment, there's one that's an anxious avoidant kind of attachment, and that is attachment figure. Go out and explore. Don't come for me for your attachment needs. And so they are gonna be out here doing it on their own. They have to operate, they can't come to that parent with vulnerability or anxiety or the feeling stuff. So it's a go out, don't come back kind of thing. And it's the parent in that situation is called a dismissive parent, but one point I want to make as I describe these is attachment styles are very effective for disabilities.
Totally.
So there are disabilities that can change that attachment style. It's not all because of parenting. Yeah, anyway, so that's the extreme of the sort of the disconnected, and then there's an attachment style anxious and ambivalent. I saw that a lot because
I hate that one.
What?
That's my least favorite one of all the three, because they're kind of there sometimes. I'm gonna say half-assed, I know it's on tape. Then other times they're not. I mean, keep talking. It's the hardest one, I think.
And the parent needs the parent
Yep.
saying, don't go out and explore. Stay here. You need to be here. And the child often feels like they have to take care of the parent. Parents are often more depressed or anxious, and that can create if there's issues going on with the parent, which you just heard are very common in parents of special needs kids. There's a lot of depression and anxiety going on. And so it's an apple or orange or a chicken or an egg. It's neither one nor the other. It happens in families.
Yeah.
And I think this anxious ambivalent one is fairly often in family, at least having my own experience with that too, is like, am I vigilant enough? Mm-hmm. And how does the child go out and explore if their mother is like, what's gonna happen? And you saw what happened, he had a black eye, right? I mean, it's real. So those are the insecure attachments. They all function as you wouldn't know it from walking around on the street. This is my personal theory I'm going to go into instead of the official theory, is there's disorganized attachment. And either they have the quality of totally in your own world, separate, not attached to really much at all. The way that I deal with stuff is to be in my little castle and be separate. Or the other end of the spectrum, which is disorganized, and I don't know if you've heard of borderline personality disorders, but that's a grown-up version of this attachment disorder, is come closer, come closer, come closer, I love you, you're so wonderful, you are a piece of shit. So, I don't know if you've ever met a person like this, but in typical, for not special needs, but that is that kind of craziness.
Back and forth.
Yeah, anyway, so that's an overview of just the attachment styles. Really, at the farthest end of that is reactive attachment disorder, and they mimic this. They either are, take me home, are you my mother?
Close or nothing at all.
Yeah.
Over-attached to absolutely everyone and everything. Or nothing at all.
Yeah, there's one, I just consulted on one, I had start yesterday.
Yeah.
And I couldn't tell, is this his personality or is it
A lot of our kids out of orphanages, a lot of our kids with early, they get adopted at 18 months from Ukraine, and you go, oh. They're actually testing cortisol levels in moms now that are pregnant with fetuses and looking at dad's sperm and what I don't know if you know this is the latest research, but the cortisol level, and you can have a child who's neurotypically always in your supported attachment, loving home, and they were in utero, the mom was under stress, never knew where her next meal was coming from.
I saw it constantly.
And that's cortisol levels that they mainline to the fetus comes out. You
Brain
never
development.
have them in a scary situation, and they have reactive attachment disorder, the worst of the four she just talked about. And they are gonna have a tough go of it, even with secure attachment all the time.
And this is how intergenerational trauma travels down too.
Yep, that's exactly.
So if there's, and I'm gonna be talking more about developmental trauma here. Let me get back on this.
Okay. I don't know where you are in the PowerPoint, which is fine. We did the
We're under
parent.
attachment.
Okay.
We have a box for attachment, right?
Okay.
Were you going to do something else?
No. no, I'm just trying to find out what.
You have to keep track of that, because I only keep track of the ones I'm
Are
doing.
you still doing this?
No.
Two more.
Two more?
I wasn't following.
I'm sorry, that's me. That's me being
Okay,
me.
keep us on track.
Little ADD, can be noticed, okay.
Oh, me too. So, that's good. More fun to be ADD. In this development of attachment, which you will be developing an attachment relationship with this
Sure.
child. And obviously, it's much less important than the attachment relationship with a parent. But communication is key, and communication is a huge disorder that affects that ability to develop attachment, right? So hopefully you'll have a key or a guide for how to communicate with the child. It's on a continuum. One of the things we talk about a lot is the development of reciprocal communication, especially with autistic kids. For me to communicate, for you to communicate back. These are called circles of communication, and that's something you develop extensively in play, because in play, hopefully, now this kid I consulted on yesterday, he doesn't want anything to do with anybody.
Yeah.
No, even if, like
Friends.
most kids, a teacher at least could sit by them and develop a little bit of this reciprocal play. No, I don't need you.
It's all self-enjoyed.
Yes.
Sounds like
And
a
he's
spectrum.
smart, well, I'm trying to figure it out. Apparently the dad is like this as well, so I don't know yet on this kid. They said no when I asked that.
Mhm.
But I think that, again, there's a continuum of people who are highly tuned in or attuned to other human beings, and then there are those who are not.
So that would be tough in preschool, because you're looking for this little kid to bond with someone, go to someone, right? And find enjoyment in play in someone. Us people who love play therapy like she and I do, we're looking for that too all the time. Normal play, you're not supposed to say normal, but neurotypical play. He doesn't really care about it, he's getting self-enjoyment, which does sound very spectrumy to me, because that's one of the top things. I'm not saying the kiddo is, I'm saying he likes self-play. Dad does too. So reaching out and letting him experience play with someone's gonna be more difficult for him. So it's gonna make preschool a little more miserable for him.
Well, and especially if a kid comes in, takes his toy,
Takes his stuff, he's gonna have more
messes
behavior.
with his project,
Yeah.
then he has no skills. And so that's what we decided to focus on, was to develop some
Teach the skills.
skills, social skills for him for now. Let's
And then you wait
see.
to see how he matures.
So the first 3 years of life and in utero, there is memory.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what she's talking about, is the cortisol it's not a narrative kind of autobiographical memory, it's a body memory. And that's why so much of trauma is stored in the body. And so if there has been trauma in that first, including in utero, up to the age of 3, that human being reacts because of that trauma, but has no way of knowing that that's why
What
they're
it was.
reacting. So it's you might just call it, we call it implicit memory, that's inner, or the body memory. And then after that age, there's more ability cognitively to tell a story. The 3-year-olds aren't that great about
It's
it, I
tough.
wouldn't say.
5.
Yeah,
As
some
many of you
some
are.
people say they can remember back to the age of 3, but I don't really believe them.
I've had kids in really tough traumatic situations that will remember a memory in a year and a half, and I tell my students this all the time. If
They
they're
got told that
If
story.
they either got told it or it was that tough. There are a couple cases in my 30 years of doing this that I truly believe, because it was such a life and death, like being stuck under a culvert and,
Yeah.
things like that, that they really do have memory, because the person
Yeah.
wasn't told till they were
Yeah,
47.
and they might remember a flash of light
Or
or
it's
the
been
noise
broken.
of a car accident.
Yep.
It's a very sensory type
Yep.
of memory, not this happened and that happened.
No, they can't put the details together that they can tell you. Yeah.
So the main way that kids develop attachment is through this attunement with other human beings, and it's called co-regulation, or creating story or narrative with another human being. Like if if that child did not have an adult who made sense of that trauma at that time, they're much less likely to have a memory of it, like these Russian orphans. Nobody, I mean, that kid was in, you probably didn't know this kid, but she was locked in a closet all the time in the orphanage. They got adopted at the age of 5, 24 pounds. Now those brains.
They haven't even begun to,
Yeah.
They're
And
so
that's,
traumatized.
that's a long-term traumatic, those brains are not gonna recover. The brains are like half the size of a normal.
They also line the kids up for the most boisterous, most kind of lively kiddo, goes front and center. Do you know this? The kids that are very more quiet and reserved and shy are out in the ends. The tail ends of the orphanages, when people come and look at them, those kids sometimes failure to thrive and die.
Yeah, because they don't get the food.
If you intermix
If
a
you
lively
want-
boisterous with a little shyer, a lively boisterous with a shyer, I want that study done, of course it won't get anywhere,
No,
but
no.
yeah. So our people, I've had people call me from Africa saying, here's their head circumference, this is their weight, they're 18 months old, they weigh 9.5 pounds. Shauna, would you take this kiddo?
I have that.
Call your
Yeah,
medical doctor, please. I don't know. I mean, my answer to that, those sorts of things, really, really tough stuff, you guys.
And the unfortunate thing in this valley is there's a church here that brings these kids in. They put them with a family for 6 weeks in the summer. They have a ball. They send them back to their orphanages. And then it sometimes takes up to 2 years to adopt that child. And they have no idea what they're getting in for. So there might be some families that have adopted kids from very malnourished in the pregnancy, malnourished, mistreated, all that kind of traumatic background. You know that one from the Congo.
Mhm.
You knew him.
I'm thinking right now of all my meth kids that I'm getting referred on from the school districts that are
Yeah.
kids that were
Yeah.
born in to,
Meth addicts, and they develop this attachment disorder really bad because the parent is preoccupied with the addiction.
And the brain is half the size. It's again
And the
tiny.
nutrition.
It's been damaged too.
And because of the speed, they're not hungry, so the parent is malnourished. Anyways,
Yeah.
we don't want to get overly
Nope.
into anything. So one of the ways that you nurture this is, can I use you? Okay, is make a face.
Have yours done.
Doesn't matter. So when I mimic that, I am communicating nonverbal empathy. I don't have to say anything. I'm just attuning to her. I'm feeling what she's feeling by mimicking her face, okay? So that's called affect mirroring, and it's a way to communicate that understanding without putting a whole lot of pressure on anybody, but it helps. The development of a relationship is about being seen and heard, and obviously with special needs kids, it's a hard thing to be seen and heard because if you are not that different from me. So it's easy for me to do this with you because you're a woman, you're younger than me, but you're not really like a millennial.
You're similar learners. You're similar
So
model.
to attune to somebody who's very different from you is more challenging,
It
right?
is,
This is one thing
much.
we have had to work with families on,
Right.
is how do I connect with my child even? I mean, you saw some examples of parents that really did figure this out, but it ain't easy. You had a Down syndrome child. I remember when I went to special ed school about 45 years ago, 45 years ago. Anyway, I remember them talking about how because of the flatness of the musculature and the hypotonia, that the child wouldn't smile, and so the parent is trying to connect with their baby, and the baby's not doing what babies normally do, which is part of that development of attachment. And if you know that, you can do the things you need to do for that, but you could also feel hurt, right?
Yeah.
You, as a parent, can feel like,
They don't love me. They're
they
not
don't
smiling.
love me.
Yep.
I must be, if you have your own issues, you can trigger your own issues
Sure.
of what you expected in terms of attachment relationship cannot be there, but if you have somebody to help you understand, they just can't do it. Like the eye contact with an autistic kid, right? That's a primary way that we attach with people, is to do that. And also these circles of communication, it does not come easy, right?
I'm gonna show a little clip about this when
Yeah.
she.
I got a
goes
couple
through
up
it.
for kids with Down syndrome. They do respond in
They
different
do.
ways.
They do.
They don't do it
You have to learn
typical
their-
ways. That's exactly right. It's like
They
learning a
smile.
new language.
Yeah.
But I totally understand what you're saying.
Okay.
You had a term for that when you talked about mimicking, what was the term?
Affect mirroring.
Affect mirroring. Yep.
Thank you.
And there are mirror neurons in the brain that help us do this.
Yep.
Those mirror neurons are not really there in autistic
There,
people so
no.
much, right? That's how I can do what I just did, is my mirror neurons pick up yours, and I see you see me seeing you. And that's that
And our
development.
kids with autism can usually perceive it, but they can't mimic it as easily. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And you teach them how to perceive it, but yet on a puzzle, they'll do it before you can even touch it. I mean, it's done already in their head. It's an interesting thing in that spectrum world, because the mirror neurons that give us the human development piece aren't necessarily there for that. Their visual spatial cortex is off the charts.
Right.
Some of my kiddos with Downs.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I always think that's because their communication is maybe impacted, and so other areas are more
Absolutely.
active for them. Yeah.
So I'm gonna diverge a second to
Yeah.
Bruce Perry, because he said, we're gonna talk more about the window of tolerance.
Yep.
But many kids, you know this, their window of tolerance is like this. So
Yep.
little things spike them out of being in their calm state of mind. I'm gonna talk more about this later. But he said the parts of the brain that are responsible for the sensory and the social go offline when you're out of the window.
Yep.
So if you have a system that gets aroused really easily, then you're gonna look like you don't care about anybody, but really it's because you're in that sort of survival state or into that lower disconnected state, is how you're managing your little window. And that one of our biggest jobs is to help kids have bigger windows of tolerance and have some skills to regulate themselves and to do all of that. But he said it's there, they just can't use it very often because they're dealing with their arousal system in their brain.
So let me tag on to that. Pediatric neurologist, probably one of the smartest men I've ever met. His name's Dr. Barbarisi. I worked with him at Mayo Clinic about every 6 months for about 10 years in following a kid, okay? Teaches at Harvard now. Pediatric developmental pediatrician, blah, 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 I don't even know all his acronyms, okay? So he says to me one time, Shauna, think about this. When you've got a kiddo and they can't socialize and they can't connect with their family, right? He wasn't talking about attachment. This is really interesting because it goes right into what she just said from a different perspective from Perry. The body's first allocation of energy from the brain to the body is to run the body. Okay,
Right.
done. So
Right.
circulatory system, digestive system, all of this, right? Second allocation of energy through the body is I can take in some academic information. I can sit and figure out where the bathroom is in this maze of a building. I can, say, I gotta go to the bathroom.
To meet those needs.
Exactly.
To solve a
To
problem.
solve the body needs, because now that's still part of running the body, right? Third area that where you allocate energy throughout the body, right, is behavior regulation. I was like, oh, interesting. Fourth and final is social relationships.
Right. It goes
So-
out the window.
So when she's talking about this little framework, he's telling me sometimes think about us, you guys, on a 2 hour a night we slept the night before, right? And then you're trying to make dinner, get your family happy, do all this stuff, and what do you do to your significant other? Shut up right now! Because I'm right here, but I have no time for you socially. No, behaviorally I can kind of regulate myself, but I can't even go there because my fuses are gone in those
narrow.
areas.
I've got blinders on
So
and
that's the difference of like yelling at the spouse versus checking something at their
Exactly. But you get it, I mean, it's like the same, Perry says it, Barbarisi says it, we know we have, I tell people all the time, your fuse is this long every day, and really for like behavior, social, academic, it's a different fuse every day. But it's, or are you in this space? Either way you talk about it, it's the same thing. But he told me that, and I tell it at every presentation, because I'm like, that's a good way even to think about where you're regulated that day. You know, I didn't sleep well, I had a migraine this morning, or whatever happened to you. I'm gonna be a little less tolerant today. Boy, I really better watch myself. I'm gonna have to allocate some extra energy, right, to be able to
And
do the
not
writing
take it
program
out on
with
your
the kids.
husband.
Exactly. And try to just be quiet when I get home and not. So I mean, to me, that was almost a game changer, because now I look around public schools when I'm consulting or wherever I'm at, and I'm like, yep, their basic needs are being met. They can run their body, but boy, academics are tough, sure they are. And then behavior and social, forget about it, right? And we want them at a busy recess or in a busy lunchroom or when they're getting overwhelmed very quickly, they're not in that space, Perry'd say, Barbara Reese'd say, they have no fuse for that. They're running their, this is why too, if you have trauma where you break a knee, your body spends a lot of time, because I'm 46, sitting there going, walk again, Shauna, walk again, Shauna, walk again, Shauna, walk again, Shauna.
Right, narrow.
And you fuse out in those other areas because of that medical need right there.
Or with trauma,
Yes.
PTSD, your fire alarm system in your brain goes off, and you go straight into that survival mode.
Absolutely.
So
And
Dan Siegel does a nice thing with his hand, and he talks about the brainstem being down here, and the limbic, which is the sensory feeling part, happening developmentally, and that the cognitive over time tries to come in and be in charge there. So this afternoon, we're gonna go over specific skills about if a kid is here, you do one thing, if a kid is here, you do one thing.
And if they're,
And then if everything is good, then maybe you can do a little social.
exactly. Well, that's the hard part of all this, right?
Yeah.
So does that mean I never go to the park unless they're here with your kid? Right? So you gotta, and then how do I get them back if they're here?
Right.
You shut up, you don't talk to them all the time. You know, like there are some major things here you do not do when they're in that reptilian or you know,
just
that limbic brain.
Explode them, you know,
Yeah.
you can
Say, I'm
escalate them.
here, I'll wait for you. That's,
We'll extensively go into kind of the skills related to all this. Did you have a question?
Oh, no, just the third thing you said, I didn't catch it. You know, the fourth is social. I got the first two.
third's behavioral.
Behavioral, okay.
Well, the ability to inhibit behavior.
Right.
Do those ever switch spaces even temporarily?
Yeah, the social and behavioral switch, I think. I think for sure primary need is just your body running, right?
Yeah.
That's what he was telling me. Second, academic, typically, like information I can bring in, but I don't have to bring it to someone else, right? Like the second two, behavioral, social, require someone else in that
Yeah,
presence.
but if you think about it and you're just trying to deal with the day, I had met with so many parents that the kid was an angel all day at school, but they came home and they
Well, they always do.
fell apart,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
is that they can maybe inhibit that behavior, their impulses, kind of get through the day, get those academics, because academics don't require higher levels of
No.
complication.
Right.
Social is very complicated, and it's drawing for some of these kids on stuff the other stuff interferes so much with the social. We use a device at Head Start that's a developmental assessment, and you can see there's items in each area, but if a kid has self-regulation issues, attachment is hit in terms of attachment to peers usually, and an initiative to go out and explore and to achieve and to problem solve and to do all that stuff. So just maintaining yourself to do all of that, and then how are you doing today, Sean? How do you do that?
How do I even get there?
I'm
Because I'm
just-
just trying to make my body feel good right now.
I'm just
Yeah.
trying to manage my needs and my nervous system. I talk constantly about everybody has a different nervous system. And some people's nervous system are very sensitive, and that makes their window smaller too. They're really hypersensitive to the sensory needs that we're gonna be talking later. Well, we don't have much later in the morning yet, but we're gonna keep moving here. Where was I? On attachments?
No, I've got you almost to self-regulation, which we're kind of talking about right now.
Yeah, I think we're just diverging to other areas, but I haven't gotten there yet. I wanted to make a point in terms of attachment about delight and celebration.
Oh, yeah.
both of you guys that talked this morning talked about that, but it is a huge part of developing attachment is to, if you have a delighted, if you like discovered something or you just did something and you feel that light come into the child, that you respond with that delight, or they did something for the first time. I think these kids struggle to be recognized for those little steps, and it's just a huge part of making that relationship. When there is, I have to finish this, okay?
I want you to finish.
Okay. Okay.
I want you to finish this. I love
Okay.
this stuff because I don't hear it all the time,
Okay.
and I don't
Okay.
ever hear it.
So this is the relationship, okay? And this is not just about you and a special needs child. This might be you and a friend or a husband or your own child, too. But we as human beings are imperfect, and we don't manage that. And we do snap at somebody, right? That is called a rupture or a break in the attachment relationship. Now, the more dismissive form of attachment, I'm not talking to you.
Right.
There is a process called repair, and it is a huge process for building attachment. This is why I always celebrate when there would be a rupture,
Right.
because, oh, what can we learn? Because if I have a rupture with you and we actually go through the repair process of you saying what was going on for you and how you felt and why you behaved the way you behave, and I say how that affected me, that really hurt my feelings, guess what? Stronger attachment. I now know you better. So this is one of the points I wanted to make, is that every time that happens, it feels kind of yucky, but if you go through this repair process, it's deeper and stronger. Well, you've probably been through with your husband a few times. Right?
And Sarah,
Everybody has it.
yeah, that's got it too. I mean, that's, I've never thought of it as a repair process to make you stronger, though. That's what's really neat.
The attachment makes
Yeah,
you
Well,
stronger.
it's kind of mind-blowing, actually.
I know it is. I'm sitting here a little bit in awe too. You want to go through? I want you to go through
Oh, I
this.
have to give you some chapters to read
What I
about
thought, okay,
this.
perfect.
Well, I would add that this is a physiological thing. When you break
It
a
is.
bone and it mends itself,
Yep.
it's actually stronger in
Yep,
the brain.
yep,
exactly.
So that's what you're
That's
talking
awesome.
about.
There's actually a trauma book called that, Strong at the Broken Places. Yeah, it's a really old one.
I don't care.
Yeah.
It's just like, I have to go through this. I'm like, I want you to.
So one thing, a primary thing that you need to understand is shame.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of conditions, even behavioral stuff, where you're getting hyper aroused, you're out of your window, and you do something wrong, right? Happens over and over again, right? And in normal developmental process, this happens. The little 2-year-old climbs up on the counter and his mom says, stop, and takes him down. You'll see the head go down. There is a physiological response that's normal in development. It's shame in normal development. Mom picks up 2-year-old, hugs him and says, I was so scared, I want to keep you safe. That's the repair, that's the mitigation of that shame experience. For people with attachment disorder and trauma, the shame gets overused. So if you think of the sympathetic nervous system, that release of cortisol, and getting out of that window, being unsafe or for whatever reason, sometimes it's just overexcitement with some of these kids, right? And the shame is actually the parasympathetic down-regulating, it's the hormones that down-regulate the nervous system. And so just knowing that that's what that function is, and it's very hard, in my experience, teaching people how to be with somebody who's in shame. Because shame by its nature is, I'm bad, I'm alone, I did something wrong, it's a self-esteem hit, and I always, when I went to counseling school, I learned about how the ego gets kind of like this, and then it can kind of pull itself back together, but some people have better skills than others for that. So that is, it's actually a biological, physiological process that's happening. And it's a hypo. So if you think of the window here, this is hyper, that's hypo.
It's
And
not enough of it.
yeah, and so there are different ways to bring somebody back out of that shame. I think we'll cover it when we do our skills, but I don't want to lose that, because to me, we're all fairly familiar with hyper, and trying to, and we're going to talk a lot about how the role of your nervous system
Right.
and helping
yourself
regulate
calm.
another nervous system, but.
So one thing I want to add to that is in the behavior world where this couples so nicely is if you have a kid who's doing it, they're 100% securely attached, they're doing it for attention. There's a different response from us for that kid. If they're not attached, you have to. You are safe, I am here, I'm your rock.
Yeah.
If you do that with a kid that's doing it for attention, it's going to increase the behavior, and they're securely attached. They have none of the trauma stuff we're talking about. They're gonna go, whoo, game on, let's roll. they're fine with their attachment, but they are literally going to go, yeah, that's a way to get her attention. I'm gonna do that again. I'm gonna say I wanna kill myself.
I'm gonna reject you. I'm not gonna
Exactly.
pay attention to mom because
Exactly.
she just told me I couldn't have the popsicle.
Yep. And they're gonna run the other way and kick dad, which doesn't get ignored, right? So it's so different. I work with a great principal in town, and he is phenomenal with trauma and crisis. So then I have a kiddo with Down syndrome, little fourth grader, goes in and I mean racks this principal because he's treating her like a trauma-informed kid. I'm presenting on this a ton. He's treating her like he needs to support every little move she makes. She, of all disability categories, is milking it up to the high heavens. And she's like, woo-hoo! And you can just see, and I look at principal and go, this isn't trauma. Oh, I gotta switch my head, he said. So there is, that's why we did this together. There's a lot of differences, but they all stem from the same thing. And I'll let you keep going, but it's a good
I
segue.
do have a question, because I worked with a family recently, and there the challenge is this kiddo and had issues like from seizures, his brain activity.
Yeah.
He's not recognizing his own negative behavior and therefore not feeling any shame when that happens.
Yeah.
But he's having the parent react to
To
the negative
this,
behavior.
and of course everybody else that works with him, but he does not have that shame sense because he does not recognize it as a negative behavior.
So that's the insight, right? I used to do like this, the ability to notice.
That's what gets damaged with some of our kiddos with needs, is they don't have all this typical
Self-awareness.
attachment stuff she's talking about, which is really tough, and it kind of goes down to the communication and all of that. There's lots of stuff to do for that. It's tough to make him recognize, but you still have to repair in your way to repair, right? Like I
You have
think
to have a
there's
way to communicate.
Yep.
This is
That's
how
why so
I
much
felt,
of this
this is what you did to me, I did, and keep it with that I language, and make
Always.
sense out of it so that they start to build those connections in their brains.
Yep.
To,
Yeah. I
to
do
see
something
cause and
very
effect
good.
even, right?
Yep.
Kids that have no cause and effect. Where was I going? Okay. Play is the main vehicle to nurture attachment, empathy, acceptance, and limits. Laughing can't happen and somebody feels shame. So playfulness can actually bring somebody out of that shame response. What I would want to differentiate between your kid and mine would be the inability to process or to problem solve or to make it right again. So big difference between shame and guilt. Guilt is, right? Guilt is healthy. Guilt is, I did something wrong.
That I should
I
do
can
again.
make it right again. How can I make it right again? And you get into the problem solving, right?
It's repair.
So guilt is not a pleasant feeling, but it actually means you have empathy for the person you've hurt. And so then with help, you can figure out how to solve that problem or how to get some ice, is what we do,
Yeah.
or check on your friend
Yeah.
and see if they need some ice, right?
Which the kids love going to the fridge to get ice when they're at any sort of age at school. It doesn't matter. They take it to someone who doesn't need it, and now they've got a peer relationship.
And then the kid who got it doesn't want to ever give it up, right? Because it's like this badge of,
Yeah, exactly. And it's pretty cute.
it's
I mean,
pretty funny.
It's pretty awesome. Then I get a behavior call about why they're getting ice every day out of the freezer.
So with some of the adopted kids and traumatized kids, there's a part of the brain called the amygdala, and
It's huge.
I call it the fire alarm because that's what it does, okay? And it
It's your
takes,
reinforcement center too, by the way, just so everyone knows. Keep going.
okay?
It is absolutely what reinforces you too, so think about this with what you're gonna say.
So it's kind of enlarged and overactive, and that affects the ability to learn, and can be an attachment disruption. It can be physical trauma or medical trauma people forget about. Even dental trauma can cause that kind of response system in the brain to get overactivated. Okay, so, well,
Poop
One
impactions is what I
What?
was gonna, poop impactions. I mean,
right, that's right.
that is one of the top behavior causers. If I chose in my practice on a pie graph, I bet you 35 to 38% of all of my kids in 30 years have had some sort of gut issues that lead directly to physical behaviors that they can't control, and then it affects their system.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and the amygdala is your reinforcement system. It's what tells you whether you like it or not. So what she's talking about is our trauma-based kids.
It's what reads the
Live in that.
situation first.
Yep.
It's what is your
Am I
reader.
safe here or not? No.
Scan.
Well, don't you
Yeah.
think that's the excess cortisol as well?
Totally.
Even since
The cortisol
this
creates it, then the amygdala gets overactive. Our kids with
And-
sensory
and-
processing disorder don't
It's
have
survival.
regulated
it's the
amygdala.
way they
Our
You
kids
need a
with
big
trauma
amygdala if you're in a war zone,
Right?
right? So,
So I'll give you this too today because it fits with all of this, but if we all went to New York City right now and flew in, got off on, the plane, 3 weeks later we came back, we'd have elevated levels of cortisol in our body, just for processing that. Take your war vet that goes over, he's first in, last out, he's a sniper and a roadside bomb checker. His levels of cortisol are through the roof. My students ask me every single semester, should we have like a 6-month, 3-month, almost debriefing, getting back to life in the States before these guys go home to read to their 3 little babies at night?
recalibrate the nervous system.
Absolutely, 100% yes. I don't know in the military, I don't know how loud I have to talk to help those individuals, but their levels of cortisol don't come down, so then we start using,
Drugs.
then we start, because that's the way to check out, because my levels are so out of whack, because of the job I had to do to be alive. I have military on every side of my family.
How long does it take for a cortisol?
6 months,
6 months.
and we're not doing a day. They fly into Butte and they're back home in Fairview, Montana the next day. We're not doing
And if they're
any sort
lucky,
of
they
checking.
get maybe therapy, but they probably got given antipsychotics to calm down their nervous system.
Well, and I'm so glad, even the antipsychotics don't necessarily, there's no cortisol lowerers for drug-wise. She's gonna talk more about drugs this afternoon. There's no cortisol lowerers. What there are good sleep, good diet, good exercise, a way to dump the trauma, and maybe an antipsychotic can help with all 4 of those, so then you could lessen a little. But do you see, like, there's nothing I can't give you. Here's an anti-cortisol. Let me suck some of that out of you. Her husband is the guru in this, and I'm like, how do you get rid of cortisol? Good diet, good sleep, good exercise, good way to dump the trauma. Oh, okay, great. That all takes time. And then your body has to adjust. We have to come back from our trip to New York City and adjust and know it's not as wild as it was. And I would say a year for some of the people, depending on what they
Oh,
were doing.
much longer for some, yeah, depending
So
on.
then
Whether
they're
they were
not right
victim
when
like
they're here.
if
I wish
they
there were a patch we could give them, or some way we could pull that out of them.
or something.
This is what
so
happened
you
with
know.
Vietnam too.
Yeah.
There is
Sleep
a
back to back.
medication that if you take it within 12 hours of a single event, like
One
one trade
event.
center, you can take a blood pressure lowering, and then the
One
memory
procedure.
doesn't do the same thing to the brain, but,
Not over habitual
Not-
trauma.
yeah.
Your
not-
body self-regulates and gets used to it. And our kids in crisis and in, really tough situations, they get used to that constant trauma, and then they have elevated levels.
Okay, And the restriction of the exploratory play I was talking about earlier, if you are in that state of fear or your mother is in a state of fear, you're gonna be restricted in your ability to go out and move into that academic learning. You have to be in a certain state of mind to learn, right? So that, I think, is it on my attachment section. What do we have next? Oh, this?
Self-regulation. Or I can go
Why don't
into.
you take a turn?
Why don't you take it? Well, let me tag on to hers. I don't know how much, I think you guys know this, but I work with a lot of different things. I'm gonna give you just a mini background so you have an idea. How old's that kiddo? I gotta do it by how old they are now. So right out of college, I worked at a place called Rivendell. It was called Gateway Day Hospitals at the time. It was a day treatment facility, all kids in extreme crisis. And the reason I wanted to bring up the vet things and some of those is I also know that Eagle Mount is doing programs for people that are veterans. And so it's the same thing with this population. So these are all of our crisis kiddos. I've worked with, I was their timeout writer. When Tina said you have to be in a right space for academic, they would blow out of their academics by kicking the table or punching the kid next to them to come to me to process. Lo and behold, they hadn't had a meal in 24 hours. Their lips were still purple because dad was at a house party the night before and they sat in the car. They were in no headspace to do the academics. We brought them in from surrounding school districts and places. That was my first job. I absolutely loved that job. That program dissolved because we couldn't get enough private pay insurance at $1,200 a day 28 years ago to keep the facility running. It's now Acadia and Butte, which is now closed too. Just to give you an idea. We had a day treatment open from 9 to 4, and then we sent the kids back to the cruddy home they came from. I will tell you, right, teachers could not, we had 2 teachers who were pretty decent, nice people. They could not figure out why the kids couldn't learn. I wish I would have known I was 21 years old when I worked there. I wish I would have graduated with 2 bachelor's degrees, and I'm starting. I love this work. $7.50 an hour every night at the Hideaway, debriefing on what we've gone through that day with the kids. But the point to all of this is, you talk about trauma at the most visceral level, that's what it was. Me wanting to adopt kids that were 14 when I was 21 and take them all home. Anyway. So that place dissolves. There's an ad in the paper for an ABA therapist, and I'm like, oh, I know what ABA is from Lifetime of Psychology. I applied for this job. This mom says, you're going to go out to New York City and train for 3 weeks, and because we don't trust this out-of-state agency to come in and work with our kid without you going out there. We've hired you as the in-home person. We're going to run an in-home therapy program for our little peanut, 40 hours a week, and we're going to privately pay for all of it. So I hop a plane, I go to New York City, I work with 8 kids with autism, I spent 3 weeks there, my 1 day off in 3 weeks, I stood on the Trade Center and went to a Broadway play. Came back, little girl, I hold up a wooden apple, and at the tail end of her yawn, we were reinforcing just any sound that came out of her mouth, because she had something called oromotor apraxia, really hard for her to communicate and talk. Hold up this wooden apple, I say, apple, she goes, apple, and I went crazy, threw her in the air, yeah! Dancing, connecting with the play, just going absolutely crazy. I think she thinks I'm nuts. That's how all of her first verbals started. Then that family talks to another one, and they said, we want Shauna to go to Stanley Greenspan for a week in New Orleans on opening and closing circles of communication. Totally different methodology than what I'd seen in New York City. New York City's operant conditioning, die hard, I direct everything, it doesn't come back to you. So I do that for a week. It was awesome over Mardi Gras. I see a totally different methodology where they'll block that door and say, Sweet Pea, what do you want? Do you want out? So then the communication has meaning. Instead of me saying, say out, and then taking something out of something, this is the way, okay. Then this program, PRT, Pivotal Response Training. So I go for a week in Santa Barbara with Lynn and Robert Cagle and watch this PRT, and then what I love about PRT, and I'm not on I use all of these disciplines, but I'm going to show you this, and I want you to look at how much Dad gives commands in this. or how much he follows the relationship of the kid, everything you just talked about, right? So there's a way to do that without it with meeting goals, and a way to do that where you're just always playing with the kid and you can't really make any goals meet. I'm going to show you this. The number one thing with pivotal response training in Santa Barbara, they're now at Stanford, is it kind of combined Stanley Greenspan's approach and ABA. So now if the kiddo's playing with something, you get down, you play with them, and you make those your kind of trials right then. They're not really trials because but you're saying, what are those? Are those tires? So now you're doing receptive object labels through this and all these different things. This is RDI, the clip I'm going to show you, relationship development intervention. It falls 100% on the parents. It's exactly what she's been talking about for an hour now. And it falls on the parents in the sense of it sends both parents, if there's a 2-parent family, down to San Francisco for 2 full days. They learn how to communicate with their kid, wherever their level of communication is. They learn how to develop a relationship with their kid. I love this stuff. There's not a practitioner's training because guess who the training goes to? The parents. I can support it with my training that I've done in this field, but I can't initiate it, and that's intentional. This is Stephen Goodstein, totally different methodology. Do they have to have autism? No, it's different labels of different things. I'm showing you this little kiddo, clearly has autism, and he's making pudding with his dad. Oh, and by the way, the 5th and final training I went on because a family paid me to go out there and see a different methodology as I was at the Dan Marino Foundation in Miami Children's Hospital. So they're together and they had so many kiddos with autism, they were splitting, and because they needed to service kids in each area, they were Skyping Italy 18 years ago, and I was watching them work with little Italian kids with autism as we were saying, okay, right now, get down on the floor with them, play, make pudding, do whatever. Oh my word, that was cool. And then the parents were required to come to 2 sessions a week. So in those sessions, they started putting a counselor in the sessions because the parents started talking about, where do you get their haircut in Miami? What do you do when it's so hot, they're sweating and they want to hit their head because they're trying to get rid of the sweat on their face. I mean, the coolest thing ever. So they provided counseling with the 20-hour-a-week pull-out from the schools. The school district personnel came in and watched them doing their sessions, if you will, but then also they went into the school. It was the best meld of the whole thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, well, we don't have that.
No, but the reason I went there was a guy from Miami had a house up in Moonlight and wanted a center to open in Montana.
Yeah.
And I said to him as quickly as I could, you guys, it is such a large state. Did you do the demographics on how to do that? And how do we exclude? And who do we exclude? And who do we not exclude? You accept everyone. And I said that becomes like, I stay up at nights trying to think about the best way to do that, that if I ever win the lottery, what would we support and how would we do it? Because it's a hard charge in a state that's 800 miles across, right? So this is the relationship development intervention. That's where my info is coming to y'all from, is from those areas. And I work with a lot of ED kids.
Do you like pudding? Okay.
Tina's gonna love this. She's ever seen it.
Looks pretty Stanley already.
I show it every semester. Yeah, and it's Goodstein. That's funny. They'd argue about it. And I'm like, who cares?
He's giving him a choice.
But is he saying, here's the difference. ABA. Which one? Which one? Vanilla or chocolate? Which one? Vanilla or chocolate? Which one? Vanilla or chocolate? And Dad's just going. And based on his relationship, he's bringing it in, and then you go, oh, chocolate, yeah. But Dad doesn't do much. Look at how many commands he gives him. Count them. Count how many commands. Pudding. You hear him? Pudding. Which I probably would talk back to him on just to meet him there. What's that?
Gesture.
Yeah. So what's the rub in the ears, you guys? I know sensory stuff, but what else is going on here? What's he anticipating?
He's anticipating the command.
And I think he's anticipating the blender already. And he's warming up his ears to get ready to do this because he knows it's coming.
He's anticipating reward.
Exactly.
Which is the sugar.
Which is the sugar. Yeah. I mean, it's any and all of those. I in my office will put gloves on and she warms up kids' teeth like they're train tracks, chugga, 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 boop, boop. And then they put the assaultive toothbrush in, right? Because if you just go in with the toothbrush, what's the success of that? If you warm up the head before you brush it, big difference with a little surgical comb. If you do some of this stuff, huge difference. With him, I think he's already going, I know I gotta deal with this, but it's okay because I get the sugar in the end. I don't know, I'm watching it with you guys, but I really do think he's anticipating that sound. Don't make a mess.
Oh!
Do you know how many parents freak out right there, right? Watch the cat. The cat loves it. His toes are in it. Do you know how many of my moms are like, no! Breaking the relationship, having to rebuild it. You need that. He's very communicative in my, I think he's saying a lot,
Oh, now the kid walks away.
right? So this is where ABA'd say, come back, come here. But he just did it by, that was a SD. That
But
was a
he's,
command.
we're, next topic is self-regulation.
Yep,
This is
Look at the cat.
self-regulating. Walking away is self-regulating.
totally.
If you went and made him come back, you would be escalating.
He could be escalated, exactly.
Yeah, so
Exactly.
anytime in those baby studies where they showed the baby
Oh, yeah.
with the mom stimulating the baby and the baby,
Yeah.
even little babies do this where they
Yeah.
look away
Yep.
to regulate their arousal system. So
The problem is a lot of kids on the spectrum don't do that. And they don't want to share with you and they don't want to show you what they've just done. So it throws that natural developmental stuff that we teach and know so well kind of out the window where you go, because he wants him to come back without saying, get over here, which is going to trigger him. Because that's a command I have to follow, right?
Right.
So dad does it a very natural developmental way and he did a clap, that's his come on over here too. It's really cool. I mean, think about this in the horse barn, right?
And do I want to go back over there?
Right.
Yes.
What do I have to
Because
look
Dad
forward
is
to?
following my lead. I'm feeling a sense of self. I'm
Yep.
empowered.
Exactly. I knew you would. I show my every college student this video too, to talk to them about relationship with
And he's
kids.
having a kid do the cleaning.
Yep. And the cat.
Oh.
Yeah. They've worked on this a lot. Mom's recording.
As soon as they get closer to the blender, he starts leaving.
I know that's what, I would bet my life after so many years of
He
doing
knows,
this.
he knows it's coming.
And I think that's why he's having to leave to regulate.
Yeah.
Is I think he's giving himself a
Closer to
little
that moment.
input, walking back. I'm in prep for this.
Getting ready to
Like the
deal
worst
with
sound in the
a
world.
sensory assault.
It is a sensory assault. It's a body assault for them.
Yep.
Are we done with it? Are we done with them? He says a lot. In my view, that is not even the right lid, you guys. What do you see? Cupboard. Oh. Push that. And he can't cover because he has to hold that lid. I think that lid's intentional, you guys, to get him used to this and desensitized. Because it's not a lockdown. Dad push it. So what he said there was dad push it, and dad went, mm-mm. So he has to do it. So he has to hold the lid to get the pudding he wants, and he has to get assaulted with that sound.
And Dad's
Because-
holding his ear.
Uh-huh, Dad's showing him.
That Dad knows I know.
Then that's the empathy.
Yes, because they're not communicating. That's why I brought this up before, self-regulation and communication, because I couldn't not put it in. This is the cutest part. See him chewing his shirt? That's all in response to get my body working on that. So I'm going to chew right here, give myself deep input on the jawbone and butt bone are your biggest proprioceptive input receptors in your body. Butt bone. Butt bone, like when kids go like this and they just bang on the side of the chair, they're totally sending dopamine to their brain. Hard sort, they're doing all over proprioceptive from the butt. Butt bone and jawbone are your biggest two. So your kids that jump hard on
I knew that.
that's all. It's all for your joint compressions all the way up your body to send dopamine.
I didn't know.
Butt bone.
That explains a
Walk
lot.
into any second grade class. That's why pogo sticks are so great. I don't know what happened to them. They say boom, boom. They give all the joints, all the butt, everything.
Like the Wiggler strollers do?
Yeah, kind of. They're digging them in.
Different.
They're
Yeah.
digging them on. Or when the kid sits on you that's seeking sensory pressure and they dig their butt bone into you, that's exactly what they're trying to do.
Any kind of joints.
Yeah. Those are your two big ones, though, as far as emitting. Now, wait time. Wait for the pudding to set up, you guys.
Oh, no, okay.
Here we go. Watch what he does. It's awesome. So this is relationship development intervention.
See you guys. Oh, I just couldn't quite see you guys again.
What would you like me to count to? He's asking Dad how long he has to wait. Okay? So they have their argument over it right now.
10 minutes.
10 minutes?
I don't know that count, is what he's saying right now. The Dad's like, so watch.
10 minutes and it will be done. Thanks for your help.
Visual timer always.
Thanks for your
Count to 100.
You count to 1,000 if you want. That's a big number. Here you can. Love you. Okay.
He's gonna count to 100 and hope it's done, but 10 minutes doesn't make sense, right?
Right.
So he's constantly referencing when Dad says 1,000, he went, oh, like, no, I don't.
He's making his own decision.
Exactly.
He's-
Difference
he's not
between-
having it imposed on him, and then
From the
that-
teacher.
when you impose it, then that child is dependent on you.
Exactly.
They
You
can't
make
do
a
it without
prompt
you
amendment.
telling them.
So what she's talking about, what I'm talking about, I have a master's degree in ABA. I have the
Behavioral.
kids and the behavior background to do it. I have always incorporated relationship with it. I get to teach that class at the college. I'm lucky enough to do it because I love telling people how to incorporate these processes together.
Yeah, these are
Because-
human beings we're talking about.
Exactly, exactly.
How
And
could
that's
it be
what
otherwise?
everyone's always said, well, you're not really,
Following
ABA
the
is what has the research, so does RDI, so does PRT is the one that capitalizes on what they're doing, and it has ABA built right into it. So that's the one that is all of them together. That was
Forefront
the,
does it too.
that was the
Same
Senate,
thing.
right, but they don't have the empirical stuff for the state to say, let's do it. That's what happened with Easter seals.
Well, because
They
some
were
things
doing
are
it.
easier to measure than others.
Exactly, exactly. But to me, this is huge because the parental unit goes and trains on it, and they're the ones doing laundry, doing all of this stuff with them, so we can support, but it's also a really great thing for the parents to learn that goes right into your hand with what you're talking about.
Okay, can we talk a little more about self-regulation now?
Yes.
What makes it difficult to self-regulate? Okay, self-regulation is developmental, it grows with time in a typical child. There's a kind of a lot of ups and downs and normal stuff in the preschool years, as you know.
Yep.
And then things kind of settle down by elementary school. Some of the challenges are, some are emotional issues can cause self-regulation. Sensory driven, we're gonna cover that separately. Arousal levels, sensitivity, overstimulation, overwhelm, and the hypoarousal, which we don't often, there was this kid that I was telling you about, it's like the fact that this kid even got on the radar was amazing, because he didn't cause any trouble.
No,
He was
he's
just playing
happy
over in the
himself.
corner
Yeah.
by himself. That's where he wanted to be. The teachers had like 6 special needs kids in the class, so
Yep,
but when
and
they
you
did,
said dads like it, so it would be normal
well,
to
that
them.
was one of my questions, but
Right.
he had been off the radar. But when we did the assessment, then he came up with the social stuff just not being there. So that's how he got on the radar. But a lot of times we don't think about the kids that are not making a lot of noise or
Tipping chairs,
yeah, so,
throwing chairs.
yeah. So in the environment, we have noise factors,
Yep.
light, brightness, the busyness, sort of the stress of the environment, clutter even. Complicated social situations are the worst.
Yep,
Um,
driving.
and some
Navigating
kids, when they have sensory issues, are sensory seeking, and so then they seek all this stimulation and then they overstimulate. So there's a lot of, some people just have a lot harder time with this developmental task.
And they have a disorder called sensory processing disorder that some of your doctors will not believe. They'll believe they're always ADD. And neuropsychologists, even in town, will say, nope, they have to be ADD, there's no SPD. Well, the problem with that is SPD is recognized by the sensory processing disorder site. In the DSM, where we diagnose everything, it is actually only covered under autism. It was a big thing in 2015 where autism actually included it, that there were some sensory needs under the new
And then there's this whole
statutes.
continuum, so of course other people have it.
But physical medical doctors have said to me, no, there's no such thing as SPD. So then they want to do ADD and ODD. There's also, if you tell me a kid is oppositional defiant disorder right now and they have sensory processing issues, I'm going to treat the sensory first all the time. I have a very nice scale that I'm happy to send to you guys that is all 5 of your senses can be exactly what she's talking about, over or under reactive, hearing, smell, taste, touch, sight. They can be overdone or underdone, every single one of them. And so in the process of figuring that out, so what it is, it's a scale that they seek this, they avoid it, it's mixed, some areas they seek it, some areas they avoid it, or it's neutral. And usually when it's neutral, you don't have sensory processing disorder. But when someone's gone from deep body input all the time, seeks it, to this end, sounds and noises, hates them, then you know.
The same person can have both those things.
Exactly, and that is 100% an OT referral. Occupational therapists can diagnose sensory processing disorder. You need to find someone who's sensory trained, sensory processing disorder.
And as a respite provider, hopefully in the
Right, they can
owner's
follow
manual
through.
that the parent would give you, there would be sensory diet built in.
Yep.
Which is on a regular schedule, having the child do some of the butt jumping or whatever,
Yep.
whatever
That's great.
that
Butt
child
jumping.
needs, and it keeps them in that window of tolerance.
Not after a behavior has occurred, which I have seen a million times in schools.
Oh yeah,
A teacher goes up or a OT goes up and they'll give a big massage after a kid's had a meltdown. Well, now all we've done is taught the kid to what? You guys put the behavior pieces. Have a meltdown to get a massage. Well, I'll get
Well,
one.
and fail. To fail and then get rewarded
Yeah.
for failing.
For failing. So you always want to do this stuff preventatively.
Preventatively.
And that's the hardest thing with self-regulation. Because people argue about what's even going on, right? Oh, that's ADD, that's not
The
SPD.
intention or the motivation or whatever.
Right, exactly.
So the biggest task here that I think we underestimate is self-soothing, which, I consulted on a different kid yesterday, and there's no way that we could have put that on his action plan that he's gonna self-soothe, because he's not even reached the year mark. He's in
he's not
Head
ready.
Start, I think he's turning 5, but developmentally, he's a baby.
Yep.
There's no way that, so ultimately what every parent would want is for their child to notice
Right.
that they're getting that hyperarousal feeling and
Be
to
able to
choose,
come back down.
and to choose an activity that
It's
calms the
calming.
nervous system. Use a retreat space, sometimes called safe place, but I'm starting to use retreat space.
Yeah, I like it too. Deep pressure, deep input. I have the whole list for you guys. In
A
this
sensory,
Yep.
to seek out a tactile thing, quiet, putting the earphones on, some of the
Fuzzy blanket. and
the
a-
essential oils,
Yep.
if you can
Calm
get
and
the
balance.
right one.
Yep.
Actually, that bypasses the amygdala.
Yep.
So it goes straight to that limbic system and calms. So it has a lot of promise, I think.
And one thing with our more behaviorally inclined people, Tina, hold your spot right there because this fits right with it. I've even in certain cases done what would be old school smelling salts. When a kid's way into a tantrum and you're in the middle of nowhere with no support, I pick a scent they love, lemon, orange, lavender, whatever it is. I don't use the smelling salts, but that is designed to reset your system. And I'll tell you what, we forget about smells a lot. To me, that would be in a pack that went with someone. If they were taking my kiddo to the park, she's
can have
got it
a
right there.
Big
Yep.
for Avery.
Yep.
Yep.
A little
Helps him
roll on.
smell,
Yep, yep.
A lot of people don't want to try it in the midst of a tantrum, and I'm like, it's either going to work or not. 50-50
Bypass
shot,
that shit.
and you'll bypass it and you'll make it smaller.
Reset.
Exactly.
We wanna get reset in whatever way
As
works for
quickly
that
as
child.
possible, exactly.
Yeah, because there's nothing to be gained by prolonged,
No.
out of controlness.
No, and their brain gets used to it, their neurology. So it's another way, when I just told you butt bone, jawbone, guess what else
Automatic.
releases dopamine? A huge tantrum. I've had kids tell me at 9 they have to rage. I've had kids tell, and we luckily have the
I
spaces
had a
built for them to
50-year-old
rage in.
man tell me,
Yeah,
the father of a friend of yours,
that I have to get,
that he, when I was working with him, he realized that he had so many frustrations having a special needs kid, but he'd be driving and he just had this rage and it was a rush. He's an addict, and so addicts have a particular need for
Totally.
dopamine.
totally.
Can I ask you a
Yeah.
behavior that I saw? I was in a thing with my son, and I saw a boy that I know, and I've been around him, and typically seems to be a super happy boy.
Sure.
But what I would say is that he's maybe ADHD. In this instance, another child had snatched a hat off of his head that he loved, and so the boy started screaming and crying, and then he laid on the floor in it was like it was a parking lot. It was like dangerous, and the people who were there supporting him told us all to walk away and just leave him alone, just like walk away and leave him. And there were people like showing concern for him, and I don't know, it could have upset me a little bit.
Did it make him worse or better?
He just kept screaming louder.
Probably they have found intervening with somebody who's screaming can actually make that. I don't like it when I'm really mad when you try to talk to me.
Right.
It just makes me really pissed off.
Right.
So
So two
we
things.
stay away.
I think two things behaviorally might be going on there. If they have figured out that ignoring and less is more right
Giving him a
then,
break.
giving him a space and whatever, but I would not be, I'd exit the eyeballs. I would always make sure someone's there keeping him safe,
Around.
right?
Okay.
You have two options right there, physical escort, which you know is gonna increase the behavior by 300%. So I could wrap that kid up and try to get him, back into.
Physically move is the last thing you want to do.
That's the very last thing you wanna do. If he
I
will
don't
calm
like
by being alone, that's great, but you've gotta almost buffer around him, that make people safe. I would be reinforcing him as long as it doesn't escalate him more with every ounce of quiet I saw. That's that body coming back. If you've coached him through it, some of my kids will spike more when you do that, so less is more, just shutting up and
And
leaving.
it has to be at the point that can get in. If they're way
If
at the
they're way
top,
up there, you're not
then
gonna.
that's gonna keep them up there. But if they're getting close to the window, then that little dose of reinforcement can help them move in that same
Okay, well,
direction.
we did what they said, and I was with Avery, and Avery was really upset.
Did
He was
he
upset.
end up coming down, or
I
you
don't know, we
exited?
left.
You left.
Yeah.
Right.
we left.
That's the frustrating part. If they're using extinction, which is what that's called, ignoring the behavior's extinction, right? To make it diminish, it should be an attention maintained behavior. He shouldn't be dropping to get a sensory need, or we're probably not doing it right.
Well, he
Need to
may
give
have been
him
getting fetal too.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was, he
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
And that's why you were upset by it, and Avery was too. And what I would do is talk to her about, honey, everyone calms down differently.
Yeah.
For him, it works for people to just leave him alone, and
Yeah.
fewer eyes make him feel better, from what
I
you were
just
told.
explained it, he
Yeah.
was very, very sad, and he needs his private
He
time.
needs his
So
private time. that's
when
right.
you're a respite provider and a child did this behavior, you go to the mom and you say,
What
this
do you
is
do?
what
This is
happened.
what happened, what do I do? Yeah.
What do I do?
Hopefully the parents can tell you.
Give you the
that
owner's
ahead of
manual
time.
ahead of time.
Yeah, like, this is
Yeah,
what we
like,
do.
this is what you watch for, because this is an early indicator where you still have time to
Interview.
intervene before it gets
They
bad.
need to know.
And
now.
then if you're fortunate, like he was really good about, if she gets to the point, she now verbalizes, like she will go, and I love this about her teacher, she'll go, I'm so mad right now, I wanna kick something, I'm like, come on in, there's a bean bag, kick it 10 times, she does, you feel better, yes, back to class.
That's
Done.
replacement behavior, that's how it should work.
So that's awesome.
And it's hard to answer that question without knowing
That
the
was
pieces
kid,
that go
and
into
see,
it.
I knew the kid in a different way, I'd never seen this happen in a
Well,
movie.
every kid is different, is one of the ones we want to communicate, and so, and the parents are the ones that
Oh,
know.
well, I mean,
Where?
this instance, this boy, I'd spent a lot of time with him, I've never seen him had a meltdown like that.
Right.
But that just may have been a bad day for him.
Sure.
Well,
And you wanna know the
well, that's
extremes.
very personal. I actually have, haven't you had situations where
Oh, yeah.
somebody messed with my hat?
Yes. Well, the hat was the first, I was like, oh. Just because I had a principal walk by a kid and take it off and say, we have a hands-off policy in school, and we had to write a 504 plan for the kid to have the hat in school.
It's like
and then
the
I had
hood.
to take the principal
It's
by
like
the
your
ear.
daughter's hood.
It's like her hood if we would have ripped it off.
Yeah,
Yeah, we,
Yeah.
and some kids, they wanna wear the same clothes every day, they got that thing, they got, yeah.
But it's tough to know, without seeing the ending of that, it's hard to know what to recommend even. I never recommend hands-on ever. I mean, it's the last, if they're 3 and totally dysregulated and hurting
If they're
themselves,
really hurting somebody else.
or
that's,
if that's actually what they need is the pressure.
yeah, the pressure, and then they can get it in an appropriate way, not inappropriate, yeah.
Right, but it doesn't bring out the best in the
It's
adults.
300% chance they're gonna get physical with you. Second, someone, I preach this stuff, but the second you touch a kid or move their hat or grab their pencil or anything, make it physical in any sort, it's gonna go there, so you better be ready. You just made it go there.
And how do you teach them sort of modeling self-regulation if you just get right physical?
Exactly.
with it?
I do it in little kids' camp chairs. I love them. I sit across from the kid in that because they can calm down in that. I can keep them safe enough. I can back away. These are littles, not 16-year-olds. As they calm, I'm still right here and they're calming. But I don't like basket holds to calm them because they will actually amp up to get the hold, the physicality, because they love that deep pressure. So I got to give it to them in the little chair with a weighted blanket, with all of that. Yeah, exactly.
She had one of those everywhere she went. She had one at home, she had one at grandma, she had one at school, she had.
Ultimately, I want them to calm in their own space without any sort of anything
Choose
from
this,
them.
which is what I'm on. So, let's get back.
Yep,
So breathing,
that's the other
eventually,
one that's huge.
that you can teach a child to maybe stop paying attention to the teacher for a minute and to breathe. Because I was an EMDR therapist, which uses bilateral stimulation, I have generalized that to anybody with anxiety. And a lot of these kids do have a lot of anxiety, and to just do some very slow tapping and breathing, and then they get to stay in their seat, in that class, and they can re-engage. It is such a powerful feeling. I got a letter from a kid when I retired from my clinical practice, thanking me for this.
The breathing and tapping.
Yeah, that he was and I taught a bunch of adults. It's very simple, really. What it does is the right brain is the one that's got all the sensory and the trauma and stuff, and the left brain is the thinking part. So what you're doing is and it's very soothing and regulating to do this.
Would love that.
Yeah.
The other thing with that is you breathe.
Yep.
So,
yeah, huge.
Number one behavior I have seen where people could change it in a moment, or I'm in a really contentious meeting with 5 attorneys and 5 whatever,
Yeah.
I start breathing and I can pass my neurology onto them, my calming, by breathing. So first thing I do, if you ever see me in a tough moment, is you'll see my lungs are as full, my diaphragm, you're like, there's Shauna breathing! Because but to teach yourself to do that is hard. You usually go, because
So
you're
you
in
gotta
this
do the
trauma.
opposite of what your nervous system wants to do, is to meet them up here, and instead, you're going down,
I'm here.
which is the low and slow handout that I gave out there.
Which is awesome.
Amazing
How to
how it
do
works
that.
at
Oh, it
IEP
works.
meetings.
Oh,
Because when I go into contentious, I'm like, we're always like, okay, deep breaths, and then it does.
You should learn to tap and
Contagious.
under the table.
that's what I do. And it's fun. You watch and they're like, oh, I just did that and that.
And in Head Start, because these are little people, I tell the teacher it's breathing on their behalf.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Oh, that's a
also
good
that attachment system and that mirror neuron thing. When they perceive that you are calm, it's just immediate, can calm them. Not
I just wanted to add that to your breathing. And
No, perfect.
from your toes, out your nose is what I tell my littles. From your toes, I'm like, picture breathing up from your toes. I mean, they get a really huge
There
breath.
are amazing numbers of breaths.
Yeah.
Kids invent breaths.
Oh, yeah.
You breathe while you put the peanut butter on, you put the jam on, they're balloon breaths.
I've never done it with the tapping though, and that would help with the bilateral.
Yeah,
It'd be great.
absolutely. See, we're learning from each other
Yeah.
too. So the other thing, for some kids, for self-soothing, they might go run around the block,
Yep.
or they might go take a bike ride, or they might go out in the garage and jump up and down, or get onto their swing in the garage, or something that's a large motor, sensory,
Squeeze machines.
large
Okay,
motor
Yep.
kind of response. So you have to figure out, again, that prescription for that child of what works for them, and they can be part of that process.
And a mobile classroom, or a spot where they can do
Yeah.
that. There's a hang dangle bar, I've done so many of these, but
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
More and more kids basically need movement, and
But the
fewer and
more
fewer
they are
classrooms.
part of that process, I
Yeah.
used to call it, as a therapist, I call it doing experiments.
Mhm.
And they go home and do this experiment and that experiment and come back and tell, oh, what happened with that one?
Right.
That made me even, okay, well, that was not the one for you.
Right.
What about this one? And it's fun and they can be engaged instead of something being
Yep.
imposed on them.
Yep. Yep.
Take a breath.
Yeah,
Yeah, that does not work,
no.
let me tell you.
Everyone,
You
why does
just
everyone
need to
tell me to
take
breathe?
a
I get
breath.
that from my kids. Why do they, I breathe every day, Shauna, why, especially my kids on the spectrum. I'm breathing all day long. What are they talking about? Why are they making an exceptionality of breathing? Seriously, they're like, don't they know I'm doing it all day? I'm like, oh. So we work on the breath, the lazy A breathing, whatever. Yeah, it's big.
So the eventual goal is to notice one's physical, emotional states and communicate about it, to
Yep.
think about it, and to solve the problem.
Yep.
Which requires the self-regulation to get into that cognitive piece of making a choice. Provider composure, which you already brought up, maintain the calm state and breath awareness in yourself, which you already did. And we're gonna cover more about assessing whether the child is in their lizard brain, or that brainstem, or their rock brain, or what I call the stuck brain, or the thinking brain, or the shame brain, and depending on what you figure out,
It's a tough one.
or the turtle, which is why I brought this, because for that is sometimes necessary. I don't know if any of you do this, but some people need to do that. This is the lizard brain. I somehow gave away my other lizard brains when I retired.
Oh,
I had one that the brain lit up.
oh, wow.
It was a
That would be huge.
Godzilla.
Oh,
I know.
no.
I
Did
don't
it
know
growl?
What?
Did it growl?
No, I had one of those too, but it scared kids.
I bet. Good. Don't scare me.
Okay.
So, what else is cropping up for you guys as you think about stuff? Maggie's madly doing salads and lovely, I can hear her
Yeah.
chopping.
You just yell when it's all
When you want
ready.
us.
Whenever you want, it's ready.
Oh, it's
Let's
warm
look
right
at
now.
this real quick. I just want importance of play. That's why I jumped to that YouTube
Yeah.
clip for you with our little one. Memory retrieval and processing speed. This is a huge one for my kiddos. It's often a comorbid diagnosis of seizure disorder with whatever else we're working with. And we're going to talk about that. I think we're going to probably wait for those and the functional behaviors. I can do any of these before lunch, or we can wait.
Or we could eat lunch and we can keep talking and,
Well, yeah.
because we're kind of behind our schedule.
Yeah, but it won't take us long. For 40 slides, I usually do in 2 hours in a presentation. We have 40 for all day today, so I think we'll be okay. What else, is there anything else you want to just bring up before lunch?
Well, I'm just worried the piece is gonna get cold.
Yeah, if she's ready, I think we should do it. I think we should load up but I'm not worried about where we're at in the actual handout.
Okay, and we
At all.
have communication and importance of play and initiative, right?
Yeah.
That's all we have to cover before we go into skills, right?
Right, yeah.
Oh, and your stuff.
And we've talked about a lot of, I'm not worried about, yeah. I think that, what I do with PowerPoints is I give you enough stuff that if we don't cover something, and you have questions on it, our contact info's on there too, so we can do that as well. Shut that off.
Maggie, how do you turn the thing off?
Oh, on the side, Megan?
So, just curiosity question. So Evie has, and maybe you both.
The power charge.
She tends to sit up,
Yeah.
hold her knees up, cross legs
It's all
like
deep
this.
Yeah.
And so the funny is she's always done that. I mean, and that's how she was sitting in
Just like that kid doing this, nobody told her how to do that.
Well, I was like,